Thank you, thank you.
Okay, you got it. This is being live streamed, it's being recorded. Anything you say is out there forever. Committee, before we start, the child care study by the Rand Corporation was released to the press at 11 o'clock this morning, which means I've been carrying it around for 6 weeks. It is now public, and they only printed off enough copies for committee chairs because it's weighty. Joint Fiscal will print one if you want it, or there is a summary sheet overview which gives you all the numbers. Again, it depends on how much we subsidize, who we subsidize, lots of levers. When I heard this as a member of the stakeholders, the bill on this one was 200 million plus or minus, significantly less than Bright Futures, but it's online, or Jill can run you off or send you the link. I'm assuming if it makes it through, it will come here for money. So it's there. Okay. At 2 o'clock, we are having a joint hearing on Zoom. Tom Cavett is going to go over the revenue forecast that the E-Board adopted this morning. And then we will have a chance to do some questions with him via Zoom. And then Wednesday, the Rand Corporation will be in to do a presentation via Zoom for us. We're trying to conserve their time so they don't have to do this like 6 times. Then they will come around to each room and we can have an individual question and answer. So those are the 2 big ones. Right now, we have Vermont Domestic Property and Casualty Insurance Company Association. And Jamie, come on up. We have a visiting guest who I knew years ago at NCOIL, but I believe new to this committee. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And I had a long talk. I did not instigate it. He called me with one of my local auto body repair shops last night.
Really? Great time.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It's one in a long series of phone calls I've had from auto body repair shops, and I'm sure you're familiar with those issues. Aftermarket parts.
Absolutely. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about today. And I'm sure Frank O'Brien, whom we referred to, Madam Chair, is the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, and can bring both a regional and national perspective to all of those.
Because some of our people are new.
Exactly. But first, my name is Jamie Frank. I'm the Government Relations Director with Primer, Piper, Edison, and Kramer. I've been lobbying here in Montpelier for too long, I guess, well over a couple of decades. And I've been working with insurance companies, various lines of insurance from the very beginning. And I also represent other numerous entities and corporations. Many of you probably are familiar with those. But I have got experience and relationships with a number of insurance lines, including life insurance and National Life up on top of the hill, title insurance and Connecticut Attorneys Title Corporation, captive insurance and the Vermont Captive Insurance Association. You'll see us tomorrow for something similar, and others. But today we want to talk, and thank you for the invitation to come in and speak to property and casualty insurance. And by that, I mean personal lines, automobile, homeowners, commercial, general liability, commercial lines, etc. And as I mentioned, this includes working with the American Property Casualty Association, as well as State Farm and a number of other national insurers. So if you have any questions or constituents, whether it's related to aftermarket parts or auto insurance or whatever, feel free to find me here in the building or reach out and find me. As you all know, you serve on multiple committees. Insurance touches several committees in the Senate. Transportation, judiciary, of course, economic development will touch insurance. I think I've even found myself in GovOps and Ag over the years on various insurance issues that pop up. But I would suggest and argue that finance probably is the main treaty of jurisdiction for insurance and DFR-related entities. As I mentioned, you'll have captive insurance in tomorrow to talk about its success story here in Vermont. And by the way, this legislature, this finance committee has played a very important role in the success of captives over the years, as I'm sure we'll hear again tomorrow. But I want to start briefly to just share another success story, and those are related to the Vermont Association of Domestic Property and Casualty Companies. Those are the ones that are formed here in Vermont, have been here in some cases for 142 years or more, and several, as the chair knows, are located right here in Montpelier. I have a handout that describes them a little bit further, and this is also, I think, on the committee page under my name, because I apologize for the small font on the handout here. But these companies consist primarily of three, and their affiliates and subsidiaries. Those three are the cooperative insurance companies over in Middlebury, and their various affiliates. The cooperative companies, of course, still do the lion's share of insurance for the state's farms around the state. There's Union Mutual on the end of State Street behind me, and their various affiliates and subsidiaries, and also Vermont Mutual right over here on this side of State Street, that is also here and been around for about 140 years. As you'll see from the handout, we've got a lot of information that can say a little bit about each company, but before, you probably walk by Vermont Mutual all the time, whether you're going to lunch or whatever, in that little unassuming storefront, they like to call it, is really, it's a great success story. Behind it are over 300 employees. Behind it are over 1.3 billion in assets that they manage, over 700 million in policyholder surplus that is there for the promises made and for the benefit of their policyholders. So they've long been, together with Union Mutual, quite the pair of economic engines in the city of Montpelier. And the domestics in general really do take their status as Vermont companies very seriously. They work with the department very seriously on issues that help them try and solve on behalf of Vermonters. And as evidenced by their existence of over 140 years, they're in it for the long haul. But take a look, when I say success story, not only is it the number of employees, but you can see some very well-paying average salaries and benefits. You can see, despite a very competitive insurance market in Vermont, they're holding their own in the personal lines. Collectively, they represent 25% or so of the homeowners market, nearly 10% in a very competitive personal automobile market, 25% or so of the commercial business, and as I say, over 61% of the farm business that those farmers turn to for their liability and special lines related to the farm. So, it's interesting that a small state like Vermont, 640,000 people or so, the extent of competition among insurance companies for the market is it's pretty competitive there, and the Vermont domestics, as I say, continue to do their own. What this sheet doesn't show, and it should, is as members of the community, they also have philanthropic and charitable arms, and collectively, it's up in the hundreds of thousands that they contribute to communities and community partners every year in Vermont. So as I mentioned, they have a significant role in Vermont, and we look forward to upholding that role. And if you have any questions related to the Vermont companies throughout the session, feel free to find me, and I'm happy to help you there. But unless you have any questions of me, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Frank O'Brien of the American Property Insurance Casualty Association, who, while he talks a little funny, he's got a depth of knowledge of insurance accent. Yeah, it'll be fun. He's got a depth of knowledge on insurance issues, and will speak to some emerging trends that we're seeing. So thank you again for the opportunity.
There was a whole article on the news channel in Boston about, is the Boston accent disappearing? So it'll be good to hear it again. My years in Kentucky, I had to learn to put R's in words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator.
Southern.
Yes, I actually grew up in South Boston.
You already answered.
It is a
Yes.
distinct.
Yeah, I already answered the question. Funny story, I have a brother-in-law, he's a retired Marine colonel. My sister met him when they were working overseas. And he visited us and it was his mission, being a Marine, to bring Oz back to us. So he hid the letter R in coffee cups. We were finding wooden blocks with the letter R throughout the house, and we were finding it for like weeks after he left. So
It's not just ours.
uh,
It's Boston.
I had the pleasure of speaking at the NEIC meeting in Tampa, where I saw you from afar, Senator, but I was way late. And my accent came out in full when I was in front of the meeting room. And Commissioner Anderson from Massachusetts offered to translate for me. But
Well, I went from Boston to New York to Kentucky. So my accent and I can still say y'all, but it's had to transition.
you sounded like Commissioner Clark there for a moment. Commissioner Clark.
Madam Chair, New Englanders do not drop their Rs, they move them. I remember John Kennedy talking about Cuba.
Yeah.
Where he put them where they don't belong.
We could talk accents all day, but it's I joked to Jamie that this is the Frank O'Brien I'm still around for, but I've been coming up to Montpelier since my hair was dark and since before Jamie had some gray in his hair too. But obviously with the pandemic, have not been able to come up to Montpelier the last almost 3 years now. So it's
We
nice
were
to be
there
able to,
too.
yeah, it's nice to be back in the building and whatnot. Some things have changed. I see there's some new buildings behind the Capitol Plaza and whatnot. And they're actually charging for parking now, which is a bit of a shock.
Well, that's because we didn't let them build a parking.
So there was always a problem parking your car around here. But just to appreciate just taking a few minutes of your time. So I work for a trade association called the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, or APCIA. And it is a company trade association. Vermont Mutual is a member of ours, Progressive, Geico, Travelers, Amica. Chances are that your homeowner's insurer or your auto insurer is a member of the trade association that I work for. Liberty Mutual is a member. Together, we write approximately 2/3 of all of the property casualty insurance sold in the state of Vermont. Auto, homeowners, workers' compensation, commercial lines, medical malpractice. So we are always in front of this legislature. We are always in front of the committees that Jamie mentioned as he was talking, and we work through Jamie here in Montpelier. I've worked for the organization for well over 20 years. I do this in a number of states in New England, including Massachusetts, Maine, and Rhode Island. And it's my pleasure to come before the various committees there. And it also affords me an opportunity when I come before a committee is I'm able to provide information regarding what other states are doing. Because as much as Vermont is a wonderful place and is a unique place, many of the problems that Vermont faces on the insurance side of things are similar to the problems that other states are facing. I also work and part of the team at APCIA that works with the National Conference of Insurance Legislators. The chair mentioned that earlier. That's NCOIL, which is, if you will, a trade association of legislators who work on insurance issues. And Vermont's had a long history with that
Yes,
organization.
some states have an insurance committee, and that's what they do, is insurance.
Representative Kitzmiller was there for a long time, and Representative Botsa worked at NCOR for a long time as well. I also cover issues at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which is a trade association, if you will, of the insurance regulators from all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and other jurisdictions. Senator Cummings was there in Tampa with, must have been 2,000 people at that particular meeting.
It was big, and you'll hear NAIC model laws come through here regularly.
And so I represent the interest of my members in my association there. I wanted to just highlight at a very high level 3 issues that are facing the insurance industry or will probably come across your table during the course of the session in one form or another. And that is because insurance is fundamental to our economy. Nothing gets built, bought, sold, or moved without an insurance component. And so it is something that is just essential to the economy. And the 3 things I'd like to mention with you are first and foremost, inflation. We are in a period of very high inflation, historically high. And while the increases are moderated in recent months, inflation still is high. And inflation is impacting the products that everybody buys, including insurance companies. It's impacting the cost of auto repairs. It's impacting the cost of homeowners repairs, the price of lumber, plywood, etc. Supply chain issues are also impacting our ability to get repairs done in a timely way, as well as impacting the cost of those repairs. So inflation, like your constituents, is having an impact on us and putting price pressures on auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and other premiums. The other big issue for us is climate change and the impacts of climate change. Insurance pays for things when something bad happens. And then unfortunately, there's been a lot of weather-related things which are bad that have been happening. We are seeing an increased frequency of weather-related losses, increased severity in weather-related losses, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, wildfires. Wildfire for us, for example, is a very significant issue in the western part of the country. And of course, flooding. Vermont flooding is not unknown in Vermont, as the hurricanes tend to come up through the Connecticut River Valley and dump a lot of rain on Vermont and do a lot of damage to the landscape up here. And then finally, there are issues involving the impact of technology on insurance and how insurance is priced, how insurance is sold, how insurers develop information regarding the risk that someone presents, issues of privacy, issues of fairness, issues of the use of algorithms and models. Fortunately, for you folks here in Vermont, the insurance department here in Vermont is very good. The department punches way above its weight class at the NAIC. For a small department, they're very well respected and always tapped in. I like this particular department. I like Commissioner Gaffney. I like his predecessors. And one of the reasons why I like and continue to like the department is that, do I always get what I want out of this department? No. Should I always get what I want out of the department? No. Do I get the time of day at the department, and do I have a chance to have my say? Yes. And I can't say that for every department that I work with. Fortunately, most of them, this department will hear you out. This department will have you state your case, and this department will balance the equities. So that's very much appreciated. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Senator Bray.
I'm curious about the weather-related or climate-related changes that we're seeing in different parts of the country, different impacts. But can you just say briefly, sort of high level, what kinds of impacts, are happening in terms of like premium and stuff like that. If you're in a western state where we're seeing repeated wildfires, or Florida where we seem to get run over by a hurricane with some regular frequency, what's going on premium wise in the places seeing some of the worst of the weather?
Well, let's take Florida, for example. Insurance is based on risk, and if the risk goes up, the premium has to go up commensurate to the risk. And Florida, for example, has a very difficult property insurance market at the moment. It is very expensive in Florida for a lot of reasons. Not only the hurricane risk, but there is significant litigation risk. And by that, I mean, Florida has a lot of lawsuits related to property insurance losses for reasons that are unique to Florida. As a matter of fact, a shockingly high percentage of all homeowner suits, homeowners insurance related suits against insurers, are filed in Florida. That is to be contrasted here with Vermont. Vermont, both on the personal line side, both on the auto and the homeowner side. As Jamie mentioned, it's a very competitive market. There are a lot of companies that want to do business here, and Vermonters enjoy some of the lowest auto and homeowners premiums in the country, typically in the bottom 5, depending on who does the measuring and how they measure it. So you could check out the NAIC, you could check out a website like Value Penguin, I love the name. In answer to your question about wildfires, we are having significant issues out in the western part of the country, both in terms of price as well as availability. Sometimes the risk is so high that you can't price for, or you have to charge a price that's basically unaffordable, and people can't buy it because it's way too expensive. There's a lot of things in the works on climate change related issues. Most of it at the national level with the NAIC, with the federal government and whatnot. So that's something that we'll probably be revisiting occasionally in the States.
And one more, that during the early onset of COVID, we had a lot of people staying put and not driving nearly as much as they had. I remember there was discussion about insurers facing a lower risk because of fewer vehicle miles traveled. Do you know if that ever translated into refunds or anything like that for automobile insurance?
It did here in Vermont, and I believe the department in Commissioner Gaffney may have even mentioned this at the briefing to this committee last week. The department did a study of the amount of money that was returned by insurers to Vermonters and found that it was an appropriate amount of money. I might add that things are back to normal, so to speak, in terms of driving. And actually, from our perspective, things are worse. People are driving nuts. And the other thing that's happening is that while overall frequency seems to have diminished a little bit, when people get into crashes, they are doing a really good job of getting into crashes. And it's costing a lot more money to repair a vehicle. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is the crashes are more severe. And the second thing is that it costs a heck of a lot more money to repair a vehicle than it used to. For example, I had a Volvo, and the Volvo had a lane change sensor plus a turn light. That's $1,000, $1,500 item. And so it used to be my 72 Dodge Swinger, that was a $150 item. So you can see how prices have increased on the repair side of things.
And we have a hard stop at 2 because our economist is going to tell us what the revenue are, which keeps me from bringing up aftermarket parts and my discussion with all the auto repair shops in Vermont. But again, it's cost and needed there.
Can I jump in for
Yes,
the distinction between flooding, meaning inundation, and flooding as in fluvial erosion? Vermont has different kinds of floods than the coastal areas, different kinds of floods than the Mississippi and its tributaries. It's not that everything gets buried underwater. It's that the water moves through very fast and hits very hard. It's scoured. Do the insurance companies treat those different kinds of floods differently?
Not to my knowledge. But, not to my knowledge, but I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but not to my knowledge. And I can recall driving from Representative Botzow's district up here and seeing that in spades.
Yeah, and that's a fear that people have, that they could lose their house, but find out, well, no, that wasn't really a flood. You were never buried by water.
I
The
do
water
not-
just moved your
the
house.
heavy rains cause quicksand slides. It's a Vermont thing
Yeah.
with the clay. Yes, it's not covered. It erupts like lava and runs to my back door. It never got in the house. If water had gotten into the basement, it probably would have been covered, but any outside damage wasn't. So we dug a ditch. We have a big ditch. Okay, we got about
I was
1
looking-
minute. Are you
okay,
gonna go
Says
live?
2 minutes.
Jill?
No, they're gonna be going live in appropriations.
In
So I'm just-
appropriations, okay, so we've got to be across the hall.
Oh, never mind.
Okay,
It was about firearm safety actually, and what's going on with insurance and firearm safety in homes, but can save that for another conversation.
Happy to come down.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy Vermont.
Thank
It's
you.
not snowing. Yeah, we're hoping it does. We need to go across the hall.
You guys.
Which they're limited on that.
We can stay here.
I thought that's.
Oh, you'll be zooming the meeting.
That's what I thought.
You could watch it from here. They'll have-
Okay, we can
That
sit
makes more
here.
sense.
Okay. Oh, but we aren't live, right?
It's still on now, but,
I'm just, if we have questions, can we get them answered from here? Okay. Okay. And some of us have not had an opportunity to answer questions. And there's a lot of ifs in this forecast.